So once you decide on your instruction set architecture, you decide how to design the hardware such that your programs run as fast as possible. And this fast has a very weird definition in architecture, because the same program, when you run it on different architecture, gives you different execution times. And when you want to compare the performance of a system, it is basically dependent on the execution time of a particular program or set of programs on your system. So we how do we measure, what this fastness basically is related to the performance of your system. So how do you define performance? We have a separate section for that on what are those performance evaluation methods. We'll see them very soon. And then, so the challenges, the history, I assume that you'll be getting it from your textbook. But then when the computers have started, the performance, we are talking about every year there was this tremendous pressure to improve the performance of the existing systems. So every year there will be a performance growth, and you have the respective, what you call, um, graphs available in the textbook, where it shows in the first 25 years of computers era, the performance growth was 25% per year. So every year the performance growth was around 25% per year. And with the introduction of integrated circuit technology, where you started embedding lot of transistors on a chip, the performance has further increased by 35%. And with this lot of improvement in the performance, two important things have happened, which is elimination of assembly language programming, where people need to remember every object code, the compatibility with the object code and all, and people move to high level languages. And then the other one is creation of the vendor independent operating system, which all altogether have uh, changed the way we look at the architecture and all. Then the growth rate, every year your growth is increasing, or performance growth is increasing by 30%. And with introduction of these microprocessors, the computer business has boomed up like anything, and this resulted in new architectures such as reduced instruction set computers. What is the, the advantage that we get with these new architectures is again performance. How do they improve performance on the systems? They focused on two important things. One is instruction level parallelism, ILP, which covers most of our course, and the use of caches. Instruction level parallelism is that where you try to improve the performance of the of the system by executing multiple instructions at once. That is basically high level meaning of instruction level parallelism. You are carrying out execution of multiple instructions at once. And from there, they also move to multi-issue processors, where multiple processors will be involved in issuing instructions and all, which all are part of your third chapter and the second, third, and fourth chapters. And use of caches also improve the performance. What benefit do caches bring to us? You all read computer organization, right? So you can tell me what benefits do caches bring to us?
They are faster to
Faster
access.
memory access.
They are faster to access what?
I mean, the memory access is fast in caches.
Yeah.
Due to their low size, we can search faster, so we can fetch an instruction faster from them. So
Yeah.
regularly used instructions can be directly fetched from the cache.
Yeah. You can access data. You can bring instructions fast. Sorry, you can access data faster. You can keep them in the. Where is cache placed?
Mm,
Near the
It,
processor,
it's integrated along with the processor.
Okay, it is integrated along with the processor. But Why is it that caches can you can access your instructions or data faster in caches compared to memory? Why is it so?
Due to the size of memory itself, because caches,
Usually
they are
32
of the
or
order of a few MBs. Memory can be expanded to accommodate around a common machine right now would be having at least 2 to 4 GB. So the
The
search time,
size, the speed at which they process also matters.
yes, ma'am.
So these new architecture focus on these things to improve the performance of the system. If you look at anything that we will be discussing from now on, except for the first chapter, anything that we discuss, any technique that we discuss, it focuses on only one and only one thing, that is how to improve the performance of the system. So how to improve the performance of the system is basically how to execute your programs faster and faster, uh, thereby increasing your performance bar or performance growth. And with this risk architecture, the growth has increased from 25 to 35 to 50% per year in the 20th century. So with so much growth, excuse me, with so much growth in the computers performance, there is also some effects, post effects that resulted majorly categorized into 4 points. The first one is the capability available to computer users. So the capability that is available to computer users has drastically increased when we compare it some 20 years back. Whatever a supercomputer is able to do some 20 years back is can be easily done by a desktop system now. And if you see, many of you will be doing your programming sessions on your mobile itself, isn't it? I know some of your juniors who are doing their programming lab sessions on their mobiles also. So the capability that is available to a particular computer has increased very much in the last few years. And then the other thing is that the improvement in cost performance, in the sense, the performance has increased a lot and the price of the systems has come down. This cost performance improvement have led to new classes of computers. What are those new classes of computers that came into existence at a very in the very recent times? Is especially the mobile devices. Um, what um, what can these mobile devices performance, or how do these mobile devices perform? When you look at that thing, these mobile devices, they became almost in par with the desktop systems. The capability of the systems have almost become in par with the desktop. I don't say that they are actually equal, but yeah, what all you are able to do on a desktop, you nowadays with the advanced versions of mobiles, you are able to do them on mobile computing also. Oh, sorry, mobile devices also. Then with the microprocessors playing a great role in the industry, these microprocessors has almost dominated the computer industry, and computers, every system that was coming nowadays was replaced by these microprocessor based systems. In fact, one example is this mini computers that are replaced by servers, where mini computers in the earlier days they used to run on gate arrays, and then they are replaced by servers which run on microprocessors. And also the fourth effect, or the fourth thing, impact on the systems or on the computers with this performance bar is on the software development. The high level programming languages that you are using have also changed, where we people moved from performance languages like C and C++. Now they are more on productive languages like Python and so on. So that is the case till 2000 or so. the performance has jumped from 25% to 35%, 35% to 50%, and so on. And from 2002, the performance growth has dropped out by, it came into negatives, it was by minus 20% per year. Majorly three reasons why there is we have been seeing the till 2007, where right from 1940s or so, there has always a positive growth in the performance of the systems. But from 2010, there is a lot of revolutions in the technologies that are used and all these things that added to the performance growth. But from 2002, the growth of the systems has reduced. The reason is that the power dissipation, because of the integrated circuits that are using in the systems, there are a lot of transistors that you are placing on the chip, and the density of the transistors have increased in such a extent that transistors, when you place more number of transistors on the switch, and these transistors switch, what do? They move switch from 0 to 1 and 1 to 0 for any transition that happens in the system. So this switching, in addition to the power consumed by the systems, there is a lot of power dissipation that was happened, which is again in form of heat, and that has to be taken care of by these air cooled chips. In fact, certain devices like mobile devices do not have mechanism like these air cooled chips to take care of the power dissipated. This is the power that was generated by the system because of this higher density of the transistors. So that limited the number of transistors to be added onto the chips, and thereby the performance has came to a halt there. One reason. The other reason is the other reason is when you are trying to improve the performance of the system, one mechanism that people have explored is to execute multiple instructions at once in form of instruction level parallelism. Uh, the thing that happened is that they have achieved a lot of growth there. They have improved on the techniques of how to achieve better and better amount of instruction level parallelism. And there came a point where they cannot exploit any more of instruction level parallelism. And then people moved, okay, so what else can we do to increase the performance of the system? Then people moved to other levels of parallelism, such as thread level parallelism and data level parallelism. When considering the complexity involved in the thread level and data level parallelisms, the amount of performance that they are able to achieve was again limited. And the third reason why there was a performance growth dropout is the unchanged memory latency. The unchanged memory latency, what is latency? Any answer?
Latency is time taken to
Yes, time taken to.
yeah, get the time gap, like to get the data, the time which takes,
Yeah, latency is the time to take, but time to take what?
like to get the memory.
Memory latency, what does that mean? I think I have a slide on that. Okay, we'll move to that. Right. Any other answers? Latency.
time taken to access a word from memory to some other location or
So
cache?
yeah, time taken to complete a task from the starting of the task to completion of a task is basically latency. So memory latency is the time that you take to access the memory and from there to bring the word to your to the processor. So for some duration, there was a point where this time was they are never able to improve the uh, memory latency time. How can you improve the memory latency time? Any idea? Basically, you said it is the time to access a word or some data from the memory and bring it to your processor, right? That is memory latency. Now I want to improve my memory latency. What can I do?
Reduce, like making the access faster.
That's what. How can I make it faster?
Have the RAM running at a higher frequency so that it can process more number of words,
Yeah, we
that
have
or
that
improve
answer
the
in the
chip
chat.
quality itself.
How about caches?
And
Do
can
they
increase.
improve your memory latency?
Like
Yes.
until the data is in the cache, we can get speed. The memory latency can be reduced, but if we have to get the data from uh, the main memory, then again it will be slow.
Right. That is true. If you can bring it from cache, your memory latency can be reduced. But again, if you want to go back to memory and bring it, your
The
latency will again be increased, isn't it?
yes,
So
yes,
now what should we do? We should ensure that whatever data that we are looking for or whatever data that we are in need of, we need to keep it in our cache.
yes,
Right. So our cache size will not be equal to our memory size. And what we need to keep in our cache will be, we need to choose it very carefully so that our memory latency will be improved, isn't it? That will
yes.
be part of our second chapter. We'll be looking into that. Sorry, I really have a bad throat. So I'll just um, go back to, or jump to those slides which I want you to focus on about the classification of the systems. If you see, there are 5 major classifications of the systems based on the way they are used or based on we have seen that slide about the goals of a system. So different systems have different goals, and considering the goals, we classify our systems into these 5 categories. So the 5 categories are personal mobile devices, desktop servers, cluster scale computers, and embedded systems. If you look at the 2 points that are there against each classification, one decides the overall cost per system, and the second decide basically the design issues that will be considered when you are developing or when you are trying to design that particular system. So I'll skip the first part. I'll come to that a little later. When you look at the classification, desktops is first thing that will comes into our mind, where we look into uh, the price performance ratio. Desktops are mainly used by individual users, so they look for a balance between the price they give for and the performance that the system gives into. So that is one major parameter or one major design issue that we look into. And when it looks about performance, graphics performance, is one performance factor that plays a role. And then the second thing is servers, which have a different set of design issues. They are relatively costlier than desktops. Availability is a major design issue that we look into, because you can't imagine an Amazon server being unavailable or a Gmail server being unavailable for a large amount of time. Yeah, my definition of large amount of time is if Gmail server goes down by for 15 minutes, it will become the headlines for the news. Why is it so? Any idea? Why is it so? What happens when an Amazon server is not available for half an hour?
They will have backup servers to keep
No,
the
I'm not asking the solution. I'm asking what happens. Why is availability such a major critical design issue for servers?
like the since it has a lot of clients accessing.
Yeah, the number of clients that they address to and the number of transactions that they do per second are very large in number.
Yes, ma'am.
So it almost becomes catastrophic when a particular server is not available for large amount of time. Another major design issue is scalability, where in scalability they often respond to very large set of clients, and the number of clients that the server will be responding to keeps on increasing, and at certain points of time the number even shoots up like a it shoots up like anything. And high throughput, obviously, when you are addressing many responses, when your queries, obviously we expect the response time to be also very fast. So when you are searching for a particular product on an Amazon server, or when you are searching for something on Google, you don't expect to wait for a lot of time to get the response, isn't it? We expect a very high throughput. The other category is cluster scale computers, which are, any idea what these systems are? These are nothing but desktop systems, but large number of desktop systems connected together, and they act as one single computer.
Okay.
And among these clusters also, the largest cluster is called as a warehouse scale computer. What all a server is, what are design issues that we expect from a server? The same design issues will be there for server also. And if you see from personal mobile devices to embedded systems, uh, irrespective of the other design issues, every classification has energy as a common design issue. What do you mean by energy? What do we expect?
Mhm.
What do you mean by it should be energy efficient?
Less like it should take less energy input to
Yeah,
run.
it should consume less energy,
Yes,
right?
yes.
How do you ensure that? When do you say
Hi.
that it is consuming less energy?
When if when the when we efficiently use the energy, then energy. Okay.
Do you have any idea whether your laptops are energy efficient? How do you say
Battery
that they are energy
consumption,
efficient? Pardon?
battery consumption, like with this much time, how much battery it uses, in 1 hour, how much
Slight,
battery it uses,
slightly louder. I couldn't hear.
how much energy it consumes in a given time.
Energy?
It consumes in a given time.
The energy it consumes in a given time. Yes. How do you measure that? How do you know how much energy it has consumed? Any idea?
Wattage of the laptop or the computational device we are using.
What is that?
Wattage, how many watts it consumes per unit
The
time or
power
something.
consumption. The power
Power
consumption,
watts
isn't it?
itself is volts per. Yes.
Right. So the power consumption is one factor that tells whether our system is energy efficient or not. So however this power and energy are consumed, I'm not going to tell that. We have a video on the Moodle server about that. Go through that. We'll discuss about that on Saturday. And then the other two categories are personal mobile devices and embedded systems. Personal mobile devices, one major example that we can look is mobile phones. And embedded systems are every home appliance coming from washing machine, refrigerator, or car. All these do have small embedded systems or small processors in the appliances. In fact, these personal mobile devices are also considered as embedded systems, but for one reason they were categorized on a different thing is that personal mobile devices do have this capability to run a different software or run an application on external application, a third party application on it, whereas embedded systems has its own limitations with respect to hardware and software. So the idea is that when you are designing a system, what different categories we have different categories or different classifications of systems which have different design issues. We'll be looking at these issues or we'll be looking at these things as our goals when we are trying to build a system. Certain systems have performance as a criteria, certain systems has cost as a criteria, and certain systems has availability and scalability as criteria. So when with these various classifications of the systems, when you are looking at the architecture, we look at the architecture on these various levels where one level is the very basic level of digital logic, which implements the digital components by logic gates, and we all assume that you have knowledge about it with now that you have done digital circuits course also. And then we have microarchitecture, which defines the structure of the CPU, which includes ALU, logic, buses, cache, everything inside. And you also have done a course on that, which is computer organization. And the next level, assuming that you have knowledge about these two levels, next comes the third level, which is instruction set architecture, which is how you talk to the computer, which defines the instructions, the registers, the addressing modes, and basically, as discussed earlier, it is an interface between both hardware and software. So we have a very we have a major chunk of this course on instruction set architecture. And Puma madam will be, I think she have already posted a lot of videos on instruction set architecture. So she will be again discussing them in the after this chapter is done. And then the system architecture, which is about that, which defines your system bus, the memory system, and how you have interconnection among several processes when you have multiple processes on your system will be. So it's a combination of these various levels that forms the architecture of your system. I skipped the instruction set architecture because ma'am said she'll take into that. Power, I'll discuss it only once you look into the video of power and energy. We have a short 7-minute video on that.